Morning, everybody. Put a pink fish on your head. Put a pink fish on your head, and you will have dignity. By putting a pink fish on your head, you can change the perspective of your work and your challenges in life and have dignity. It's a great pleasure to be with you this morning, and I am going to work with you today to make sure that as you work with seniors, as you work with children, as you work with persons who have been incarcerated, with persons who have been released, with persons who you've never met before and never want to meet again, that you will maintain your dignity. Let me tell you about how I got my pink fish. It goes back to, 50 years ago. This past week, we've been celebrating something, a monumental achievement of humankind in technology. What is that? The landing on the moon. By who? Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And who was the guy who went around? Mike Collins. Who? We get extra points up here in the front. Very, very good. And that was 50 years ago. And I was in love with that opportunity. The whole world was watching that. And there, as a little boy in Oak Park, Illinois, I watched the landing on the moon. And the next day, I called my grandfather and said, "Grandpa, isn't it great? They put a man on the moon. Wasn't that just absolutely wonderful?" And he said, "Timmy, I'm glad they did that, but the hardest part is bringing them back." And he was right. They had to figure out how to do the re-entry and do all of those wonderful calculations. And I am so glad for the movie Hidden Figures, because it teaches us that it isn't only the astronauts, but it's the people behind the astronauts who make all of the difference in the world. And we just thought it was those brave men and their courage and their dignity and their parades. But no, it was much bigger than that. And July 24th, 1969, 50 years ago today, those astronauts splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. Now, as I look around the room, I might be in the minority here as to all those of us that were old enough to remember all of that happening. But friends, my brothers and I and the whole neighborhood thought the world of those astronauts. We wanted to be an astronaut, yes? We wanted to fly to the moon and come back. We used to run around the neighborhood like this, like we were on the moon. And we drew rocket ships on our school papers because school was so exciting that we had time to draw rocket ships on our school papers. And we delighted by everything that the astronauts did. We put on football helmets and walked around like we were astronauts there on Humphrey Street. And we took our bicycles. Did you ever do this? And you would get on your bike and you would do the countdown. T-5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we pedal like mad. Lift off. We have lift off on our bicycles. And the weirdest thing that we did was that we learned to talk like astronauts. It would go something like this. Houston, yes. Tom, yes. It's time to come in for dinner. Everybody wanted to be an astronaut, except for me. For me, the pull of the circus was stronger than the pull of the moon. You see, the year before, when I was 8 years old, my family was given tickets to the greatest show on earth, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus at the Chicago Amphitheater. Oh, the circus. We were so excited. We got all dressed up and went down to see the lions and the tigers and the whole of the circus. And we went in, all six, and there they had a lion tamer. Oh, so brave. And they had a woman who worked with polar bears, and they had rocket ships that were way up in the air, and they spun around, and people hung from the bottom of them doing acrobatics and aerobatics up in the air, and there were flames shooting out the back of them. It was magnificent. And then my brother had to pee. And with 4 little boys If one boy had to pee, everybody had to pee. So we got with my father and we trooped off toward the bathroom. But, I was fascinated. I looked around and there was cotton candy, pink and blue, and it looked wonderful. And hot dogs. Ooh, I was hungry. And hot dogs were going to be great. And there were balloons and all of the great people. And I wandered off. And I went and there were curtains. Now, a little boy, you can't resist, right? So I pulled the curtains apart. And the room was full of clowns. Clowns playing cards, clowns talking to other clowns, reading the newspaper. And then one giant clown stood up and walked toward me. He looked down at me, and he squatted down in just an instant. He clowned with me. And I was hooked. That's all that I ever wanted to be. Police officers, no. Astronauts, no. Doctors, no. My parents were so proud. When I was 14, I turned into a professional clown, was terrible at it, but went around to parties and did all of those kinds of things. And then when I was 18, it was time to go to college. Anybody been to college? How's that application process? Yeah, difficult. I didn't want to apply to any old school. I applied to school that was harder to get into than Harvard Medical School. In fact, they only took 100 students, usually less. And of those 100 students, not all graduated. And of those that did graduate, only 30% actually got a job. I applied to and was accepted to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Clown College. You could go to college to learn to be a clown. Oh, this is going to be great. We learned stilt walking and makeup and how to dance and how to juggle and all of the fun things that you can possibly imagine learning to be a clown. And not only did I graduate, I got a job. I became a clown on Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth. Woohoo! Thank you. I had a big red nose and a pink afro, baggy pants, of course, but they were striped and wonderful. And on the bottom, I didn't wear those big shoes because you can't run and dance in those big shoes. I had pink and white saddle shoes. And it was the 70s. They had 2-inch heels. I loved the circus. We lived on a train and traveled all over the United States, got to see wonderful cities from views that most people don't get to see in the cities. And we did great things. We rode elephants. We danced with camels. We rode horses. We juggled. I was in the clown ballet, which was great fun. And I got to dance with showgirls. Oh, it was wonderful. And the number that I want to tell you about this morning was the one where we had what we called the spectacular. More than 100 performers out all at one time, and all of us in this grand menagerie, elephants underwater. We were in an underwater sea. The elephants were disguised as fish, not very well. You could still tell that they were elephants. And they pulled long chariots filled with children under the water. And Mishu, the littlest man in the world, he was part of the circus. Mishu was on the back of a bounding dolphin, which was kind of tricky because Mishu drank. And they had to strap him onto the dolphin to keep him on. And my job was to ride a giant green seahorse up and down, way in the air in this sea of bubbles. And my costume, silver shoes and spangled bell-bottomed pants and a gladiator's jacket and I was an undersea gladiator riding a seahorse. And on this helmet were all kinds of pink spangles. And on the very top, here it is, was a pink fish. I danced with a pink fish on my head for a living. It was kind of cool. And that taught me how to maintain my dignity. Because after leaving the circus, I was poor. Anybody been poor? And I had a car that was mostly rust and smoke. And when you show up for a date in a car that's mostly rust and smoke, you got to work on your dignity stuff. But I would say to myself, if I can dance in a gladiator's outfit with a pink fish on my head, I can do this. Later, I had my children, and I wanted to be involved in the local schools. And so I became an art mom. Now, you might think, no, you're an art dad. No. It was very clear on the pieces of paper. Art mom. My supplies came in a box that said, art mom. I sat in the meeting and the woman stood up in the front and said, welcome, art moms. Okay. And the biggest thing that challenged my dignity, I love teaching them. And, kindergarten, that was my level. Except that the kids in the kindergarten, their art projects came out better than mine. And so I had to put my pink fish on my head because some of the kids noticed that my art didn't come out so well. And I put on my pink fish and I said, if I can do that, then I can do this. In your daily work, do you struggle sometimes to maintain your dignity? Do you look at some of the things that you're asked to do and think, how can I do those things? Let me suggest to you that you put a pink fish on your head and you will be able to maintain your dignity. What are some of the simple ways that you maintain dignity at work or in your life? Some of the simple things that you do. Friends, this has to be interactive or it's going to be a very, very long hour. Yes? Doing a good job, being competent and doing your work well. Right. That's a great way to maintain dignity. Anybody else? Yes? Humor. Absolutely. You've got to laugh, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But humor is such an essential part of it. Yes? Take breaks when you are overwhelmed. Absolutely. We got an amen on that one. Absolutely. Yes? You got to say it louder. Use your teacher voice. A great music playlist. Absolutely. Do you dance? Not at all? Oh, dancing is a challenge to dignity of people like you, like me. We get up there and we got it rocking. Ooh, it can be tough. It can be tough. But you dance with a pink fish on your head, then you'll know dancing. Yes? Maintain ethical values all the time. Absolutely true. And is that sometimes hard? You bet it is. You bet it is. You got somebody yakking in this ear and somebody else in that one. It can be very difficult. Yes? Oh, say that out loud, really loud. Let go of your need to be right. If they would only do it the way that I think it should be done, they'd be great. They'd be as great as me. Yeah. What a lie. Yes. Choosing to have a good, positive attitude. Absolutely true. Yes. Remembering why you got in this in the first place. That can be hard, can't it? Yeah. I have to deal with these idiots. And I'm talking about your coworkers, right? It has nothing to do with the clients. The guy in the next cubicle who trims his toenails during work hours. Woo! Somebody else wanted to get in here? Yes. Finding joy or the silver linings in the kinds that you think, in the things that you do. Finding your successes is so important, and acknowledging those successes. I had a pity box in my desk. Still do. You know what a pity box is? When I'm feeling pitiful. And in it, I put thank you notes that people have sent me. Yeah? I I use up a gift card that somebody has given me, and then I put it in my pity box because that's a thank you note too. All kinds of wonderful things in there, even one of my kindergarten art projects that didn't turn out so well, but it brings me great joy to do that. A friend of mine makes a great cup of coffee in the morning, and that's how she carries dignity into her day. She says, I know I can do well in my day if I just have a good cup of coffee. Anybody like that? Absolutely. That's why you spend for the Starbucks, right? Yeah. And then when I was working on the north side of St. Louis, terribly impoverished area, and I had an instructor who was working with me, and she gave me one of those ways to maintain your dignity that I have yet to forget. She told me, it was one of those always statements. Aren't you suspicious of those? I always am suspicious of those. And it was one of those always statements that stuck with me, and I use it always. She said, when you go into a client's home, anybody of you ever go into a client's home? Oh, yeah. When you go into a client's home, sit on a hard chair. Well, I'm getting some amens already. Sit on a hard chair. Always sit on a hard chair because you're less likely to get bugs. Nothing will challenge your dignity quite as much as going home with bugs. And that's before bed bugs were the big problem that they are today. It's such a pleasure to be with you this morning. I have worked in DuPage County with folks like you for more than 20 years. It was funny when I put that together. I'm getting that old, and it's a great pleasure to have worked in senior housing, to work with PADS and provide shelter for persons who happen to be homeless. And it's been a pleasure to work with the hospital administrators, to be chaplains in the hospitals, and to work with folks in those communities, and to supervise and to run affordable housing in DuPage County. The work you do is so very, very important to the health and welfare of the whole county, and it is frequently overlooked, right? Because we don't produce profits, we produce positive people. And thank you for that good work as you do that. So let me share with you that dignity is not about what you do. It's about who you are. Dignity is not about what you do. It is about who you are. And if you're going to be the intervention, you're going to need to be a positive, dignified person. Yeah? Dignity. You look it up in the dictionary, and so often it says being recognized by other persons for who you are. Being an upstanding member of your community. Being a powerful person. That's a lot of hooey. Dignity doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. Dignity is maintaining your self-respect. Maintaining your self-respect. And that's why the pink fish is so important to me, because I often have to tell myself, you danced with a pink fish on your head, you can do this. Yeah? You can be an art mom because you danced with a pink fish on your head. You can drive a stinky car because you danced with a pink fish on your head. It doesn't matter that your car stinks. It doesn't matter that your art stinks. It matters that you are a good person, dedicated to the job that you're doing, holding on to those values. Yeah? Are we there? All right, good. One of the ways that you can do this and maintain your own dignity is to be present. Do you ever find it hard to be present? What are you worried about right now? You know, my daughter's driving to her job. I'm a little anxious about that. My phone's ringing. Should I answer it? And I'm going to bet that was not a millennial. Because millennials don't make noises with their phones, right? Sorry, whoever you are, I'll apologize again later. But thank you. Thanks for that great cue. I appreciate it. There are so many things that distract us. I've got to go grocery shopping later in the day. My child is home sick. I've got more paperwork to do than I can possibly accomplish, and I still have to serve my clients. Any of those true for you? And does your leg shake? My leg shakes all day long. Sometimes it really gets annoying, and I have to reach in and make it stop shaking because we wind up being our phones, yeah? We wind up being our phones. We're constantly checking, oh, that was a great Facebook post I put in earlier today. Why haven't more people liked it? How come my Instagram isn't blowing up? Surely I could change the world if only people would pay attention to my Instagram account. Oh, did you see the headline? Oh, did you see what he did again? And then we wind up in front of our clients in the prayer position. You know the prayer position, hands folded, head bowed. This is going to buzz. The way that you are present for the other person provides them dignity, and they will return to you dignity as well. Be fully present with the person who is in front of you, and you will maintain your dignity because you can only do that from a place of self-respect. And then they will return that dignity back to you. Be fully present. Be energized. Be interested. Be present with the person who is in front of you. And you will maintain your own self-respect, and you will have dignity for that other person. Yes? Is it a struggle to be present? Absolutely. Is it important to be present? Absolutely. I was in a store the other day, and the clerk was waiting on me, and she had, what are they called, ear pods in, and I didn't know if she was listening to me or listening to music. I didn't know if she was talking to somebody else when she said hello. She was not present, and I needed her to be present for me because I needed a little help, and so we interacted. And I said something stupid to her, and she gave me a stupid look back. I knew that we were present. And in that moment, we connected. And that's what it is to serve clients, is to connect. They will remember you if you care for them. You can provide services. You can make a difference in so many ways. But be present with those persons, and they will be present with you, and you will share dignity. See, that's not about what you're doing. It's about who you're being. You are being the intervention and making a huge difference with them. Does your job ever give you the willies? I think that our jobs should start with a trigger warning. But we don't get that luxury, do we? We walk into situations that, bleh. I was a fire chaplain, and part of my role was to go to the ambulance and fire calls, and they usually only called me on the difficult ones. And one night, why does it always happen at night? I was called out. Now here's something that I do that maybe you can do. When I'm called out in the middle of the night, I take 2 minutes. Of course, I dressed myself. Sometimes I almost forget. But I brush my teeth. It seems like just such a silly thing. But in the moment of brushing my teeth, I open myself up. The mint wakes my brain up, and it makes me feel present to myself so that I can go. So next time you get called out in the middle of the night, give it a scrub. So I get called out in the middle of the night, brushed my teeth, and race off. And a train had demolished a life. And when I got there, the ambulance was being loaded. So I jumped into the ambulance and raced to the emergency room. There were body parts contorted. There were moist maggots. There was a life broken and enough body fluids to make a Quentin Tarantino movie. And as we were in that emergency room, the head nurse, the lead nurse, touched my arm and said, can I see you in the hall for a minute? I said, sure. And so we walked out, and as we got through the door just into the hallway, she went, yuck, yuck, yuck. Maggots, I can't stand maggots. Maggots are my limit. You been there? Ew. Ugh. We all have our limits. There's something that triggers us. Maybe it's an old memory. Maybe it's something your brother did to you. Maybe it's a challenge that you face in your life. Maybe it was your uncle teaching you how to put the worm on the hook, and it just sets you off. Even a veteran ER nurse can be triggered in that way. Anybody ever been triggered? You go in the room and you go, ugh. Some people will remind you of your mom. And if that isn't triggering, I don't know what is. Friends, sometimes you just need to shake it off, right? Shake it off. Ooh, that person made me nuts. Shake it off. That person just treated me with such disrespect. Shake it off. My boss is on my case again. Shake it off. How am I going to get through this day? Shake it off. One of the ways that you can maintain your dignity is to shake it off. Anybody do that? You stand in front of the person, you go, bleh. Yeah, tomorrow you're all going to be walking around going, and we'll know. But it's a very real issue that we can be triggered. Firefighters go to fire calls that they can't get out of their minds, and so they have to go to counseling. Counselors deal with patients that they need to go to counselors to fix what's happened to them, to process, to shake it. Sometimes you need professional help to shake it off. Yes? One way of maintaining your dignity is to get that professional help and make the difference. You with me? Good. The other thing you can do is don't make the other person's disrespect your disrespect. If they're disrespectful to you, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Leave their disrespect aside and keep your own self-respect. Yeah? We deal with broken lives. We deal with broken families. And so often we will go home. You've never done this, I'm sure. So often we will go home seeing an abused senior, someone who has been neglected, and you look at the way that you call and treat your mom, and you're like, ooh. Or your kids talk to you, and you go, ooh. Leave work at work. Bring your self-respect home. So often we encounter lives where persons have damaged their bodies or poisoned their minds. And we go home and we see in ourselves those tendencies. Leave their disrespect aside and hold on to your respect. that can be your great value. Is that hard sometimes? Oh, you bet it is. You bet it is. People can trigger us in those ways, and then we take it out on our families. That happen to you? All the time. The other thing to do is to treat your colleagues with respect, because you maintain your self-respect by being respectful of your colleagues. Yeah? What does it mean to put a pink fish on your head when you're working with your colleague? I was working with one person. This person could not figure out how to upload a file to save their lives. I've taught them this 15 times. And at this point, I've got one nerve left, and they're picking at it. I was asked to do it one more time. And so I said to myself, self, put on your pink fish and help this person who happens to be right in front of you. Put on your pink fish, because that's how you will make a difference. Put on your pink fish, because then you can deal with those difficult ER room visits. Put on your pink fish, because then you can deal with that senior who is making you crazy. Put on your pink fish, because then you can make a difference in other person's lives. Put on your pink fish, and you will have your dignity. Do you know what your pink fish is yet? Think for just a minute. What's the weirdest thing you've had to do? What's the weirdest thing you've had to do? Really? That's the weirdest thing you've had to do? You haven't had to dance with a pink fish on your head? Oh, that's too bad. So here's a recommendation. Go get a pink fish and tie it on your head and dance. Our jobs can be challenging and difficult, and we are called to reach out to others and make a difference in a child's life as a volunteer, make a difference in a senior's life as an advocate, make a difference in the senior's life by helping them to be protected. Our lives can make differences in other people's lives. We can maintain our dignity because that is what we are called to do. Yeah? One of my roles as CEO was to oversee affordable housing. We have people here who do affordable housing for disabled adults and seniors, and we had great fun with that. And I loved to meet my residents, because when I met my residents, I got to see the whole person. Is that hard for you sometimes? To see past the diagnosis, to see past the dysfunction, to see past the brokenness in that person's life? I love to meet people because they would remind me that they were whole people, and that would help me to advocate for better senior housing and help me to do my job better. But it's hard to see a whole person when you're given a sheaf of papers that shows this person's income. And you're like, why are you spending your money that way? It's hard to see the whole person when they present as just a craziness in front of you. It's hard to see that person as a whole person. So I worked with my staff and had them introduce me to people who I should know. People who wore their pink fish and wore it well. And one of those people was Bernice Chevereau. Bernice was one of these people who everybody should meet. Bernice grew up in the Acadia Parish swamps in Mississippi. She was one of 7 children. Her parents didn't have a TV. She went on to be a WAC. You know what a WAC is? Women's Army Corps in the Second World War. She was a truck driver. She was a truck driver who drove a truck of medical supplies to field hospitals near Normandy in Europe. Now, being a WAC was something that made you wear your pink fish, because people talked badly of WACs. They were suspicious of them. First of all, what were women doing in a battlefield? Now it's common practice for us, right? And secondly, these women were treated by the men as meat, and they were seen as women of disrepute and suspect morals. they didn't put it quite so kindly. And so Bernice had to put the pink fish on her head in order to have that opportunity. And she did it. She believed that she was serving her country and doing a good job of it, and so she did it with dignity. It wasn't about what she was doing, it was about who she was. After the war, Bernice reluctantly gave up her working life and got married and had 3 children, moved to Louisiana where her husband could work and she could take care of those 3 children at home. Bernice had the great skills of a mother. She was a drill sergeant to those children. She taught them wisdom and courage and discipline. And they had all of those, and they resented their mother as well. It's hard to be a mom. And so you've got to put your pink hat on in order to do, you put your pink fish on in order to do that. And then her 3 boys volunteered, signed up for the army, and went to Vietnam. 2 of them didn't come home. And she struggled. She struggled with her own conflicts about what her sons went through and her own conflicts about the war that we were in. And as she talked, she and I cried. And then she told me about her husband, who in the 1990s got cancer. And she nursed him. She brought him home from the hospital, and she nursed him for 19 long months. And when, on a warm summer afternoon, as she struggled with him, the sun shone in, they held each other's hands, and he died. His pension died with him. So now all that she had was Social Security. Her son lived in Florida. She lived in Louisiana. What was she going to do? She moved into affordable senior housing. She moved into a 15-story high-rise overlooking the 9th Ward. She lived on the 12th floor. It was crazy. She loved it. She had loads of friends. She'd never had such a great opportunity in her life. She loved watching the city move underneath her from the 12th floor. And then, in August of 2005, the Gulf of Mexico roiled and warmed and blew up a level 5 hurricane. We call it Hurricane. And Hurricane Katrina came ashore. Most of the residents had evacuated out. They'd gone to local family. They'd gone to shelters. But not Bernice. She's tough. She's a WEC. She can do this. And so she stayed. And the winds came in, and the water came in, and it filled the streets, overtopped the levees, and the power failed in the building. The staff had evacuated. The elevators no longer worked. And she, Bernice, was stuck on the 12th floor. She loved to look at the cars bobbing in the waters in the streets. So she stood in front of her picture of her as a WEC that she always had on the wall. She pulled her head back, squared up her shoulders, put her pink fish on, and said, I can do this. And she gathered up her little supplies and her purse. Got to have your essentials. And she went down the hall to her 92-year-old friend, Alice, who had also stayed in the building. And these 2 women, 88 and 92 years old, stayed in the building. They ate their canned goods. They rationed their water. They lit candles at night to stave off the darkness. And they sang patriotic songs to fight the boredom. And then, on the seventh day, a knock came at her door. Bernice went over and opened the door, and it was a firefighter saying you have to evacuate, you have to get to the roof right now. Now, as Bernice was telling me this story, she interrupted herself and said, you know, all firefighters are handsome. So the two women started to gather up their goods, and the firefighter said, no, you can bring nothing with you, just the clothes on your back. You need to be on the roof in 5 minutes. 3 stories up, 6 flights of stairs. Bernice grabbed what? Of course. And the two women went up all of those flights of stairs, backwards, on their bums, stair by stair by stair. And when they reached the roof, Bernice got her first and only ever helicopter ride. And the helicopter flew her out and dropped her, no, wrong word, and set her down in the parking lot of the Superdome. And she went inside, and they took her name and gave her a sandwich and a bottle of water and a blanket. And she slept on the concrete floor and played cards with the other people in the Superdome. For 3 days, she was in the overcrowded, stinking, fetid Superdome while her son was in Florida, desperately looking for her. On the 3rd day, he called and got her at the Superdome. And she was evacuated out and moved in with her son. Now, can you live with your parents? More to the question, can you live with your children? And so she got out of there quickly. And she came to one of our residences there in Florida. And there she moved in. And the residents got together and gave her dignity. Because when she got in that helicopter, what did she have? Her purse. Nothing else. So when she was going to the apartment, she didn't have a bed. She didn't have sheets. She didn't have pots and pans. She didn't have anything. Not even clothes. And so our residents, all of them living in affordable housing, gathered up supplies, pots, pans, dishes, so on. One of our groups even made a quick quilt for her to have. It was a blessing. Oh, by the way, she insisted on a first floor. So there I sat on my hard chair and listened to Bernice and all of the great things that she had done in her life. And I got to see the whole of this person. And her telling her story brought me dignity. And I was so grateful that I got to know her in her whole capacity. Yeah? Because it wasn't about what she did. It was about who she was, her courage, her strength, her fortitude, her deliberateness. And that was inspiring. And so, as is my wont, because I am a pastor, I wanted to pray with Bernice. Now, I've left out a significant detail here. Bernice, by this time, was stone deaf. So it was hard in the communication. And there we were in her apartment in our building, and I said, Bernice, may I pray with you? No, that's not true. I said, Bernice, may I pray with you? And she said, oh, Reverend, I wish you would. What would you like to pray for? I haven't moved my bowels in a week. I actually said it out loud. I said, Tim, you have danced in a sea of bubbles in a pink gladiator's outfit with a pink fish on your head. You can do this. So I put on my pink fish, took a tight hold on her hands, and knowing that it wasn't only God that needed to hear me pray, but Bernice also, I, at the top of my voice, prayed that the captives may be released. Now, you might think that that's the end of it, but it's not. You see, I'm a CEO, right? In one of our buildings. Do you think my staff was out in the hallway? Oh, yes, they were. Do you think they were listening? Oh, yes, they were. Now, I have just assembled my dignity in prayer, and now I have to go out and face my staff. So what did I do? I stood up, and say it with me, I put on my head, and I walked out, and we just galed in laughter because it was such an absurdly wonderful situation. So glad to have met Bernice, and so glad to have a pink fish that I can put on my head. Friends, dignity is not about what you do. It is about who you are. Put on your pink fish. Thank you very much.